can't do this without my Santa hat. When I was I must have been either in pre-K, kindergarten, one of the two. I distinctly remember that my mom told me Santa's not real, just don't tell the kids. Hey everyone, I go by Lauren on social media, but you can call me Victoria, and welcome to a special episode of Witness to Glory. So since 2024 is coming to a close, I thought I'd break down what a year of doing church photography can look like. From the amount of photos I've taken, to the gear that I've used throughout the year, to highlighting some of my favorite photos from each month, and even discussing my successes and challenges for the year of 2024. And I assume that since you clicked on this, you might be curious about church photography. So I want you to know that this episode is a part of a greater series called Witness to Glory, where I speak about not just church photography, but getting to the heart of what we do as photographers. So if you are a church photographer or are interested in church photography or Christian, or even you're curious about the Christian faith, then this series will be perfect for you. I already have 3 episodes that are available for you to watch. Here's a look back into a year of doing church photography, starting with January. So in January, now this number is a little bit off because it doesn't include the photos that I took on the New Year's service. From what I have exported from Lightroom onto my hard drive is a total of 784 photos. So my hard drive contains what I call my church archive. So just so you know, I've been doing photography for 7 years and church photography for 5 years. So for February, it's 823 photos. March was a busy month, 1,295 photos. April, 842 photos. May, 818 photos. June, 942 photos. July, 861 photos. And in August, had some time off. This number is a little bit less, 704 photos. September was a busy month, total of 1,109 photos. October, 978 photos. November, 814 photos. December is not over yet. I am filming this the week of Christmas, hence the Santa hat. So as of right now, 1,067 photos. And then there's extras. So these photos that I added, I didn't categorize them for the month, things that I photographed for separate ministries, and that amount is 194 photos. So in total, that's approximately 11,231 photos. But it's actually more than that, because some of the photos that I have in Lightroom, I never exported. I have quite a bit of unedited photos in the hundreds. Most of the photos counted are the ones that are on my hard drive. Now, these numbers might seem small, especially if you are coming from other types of event photography, wedding photography. But this number is actually a reflection of my photographic process. So they say photography is a numbers game. If you take X amount of shots, you're bound to get Y amount of good shots. With this logic, there's a chance that shooting more will get you more good photos. But what if you shot less and still got a proportionate amount of good photos? And so that's my thought process. There's a caveat to this. For instance, like sports photography is a little bit different. I would rather take less photos and get a proportionate amount of good shots than take more photos, because that's more culling. That's more work that you have to do. So instead of being in a situation where you're taking so many shots and a lot of those shots are going to end up being useless, you can take less shots where more of those shots are actually useful. So that's like my way of thinking when it comes to church photography, especially because I'm shooting a minimum of 2 times per week. And then on top of that, I do other photographic work. That's a lot of photos that I'm going to have to sit there and go through throughout the week. And then plus, a lot of the photos that I deliver is same day edits. So it's like, I need to consolidate my process, so I need to consolidate my shooting. What basically encapsulates my process is shooting with intentionality. So I'll share more practical tips on that in an upcoming episode. Now, for each month, I have select photos as my favorite photos of those months. So now, these photos are not reflective of my best work. They're just my personal favorites because some of the stories behind it. I approach photography from like a storytelling perspective. I see it as a medium to tell stories. And so the thing is, context matters because for some of these images, they're not meant to be standalone images. They're meant to be a part of a collection, starting with January. Okay, now this is what I would consider to be maybe more of a single story photo, in that you can post this image standalone and I think people can understand the context. Sometimes, when it comes to photography, kind of like a stroke of luck. What actually works out for me in this photo, when I took it, I was just more drawn to the act and photographing that. What I missed was the fact that you have the lights in the background. That was not intentional. I did not compose the shots to have the lights there, and those particular lights, they actually rotate around. So the fact that the lights were able to be there in that image, praise God. This one, or should I say these two, I like this because it shows how just subtle changes in an image can affect story that is ultimately being told in the photo. This is also, I think, a testament to kind of being like patient. I could have just, opted for just taking the first shot and just walking off, but then I decided to wait there just a little bit and I got the second. A lot of the photos that you're gonna see in this series and throughout this series are faceless. That is intentional because one, I want to be selective of the photos that I share. Secondly, I ultimately think that faceless portraits allow the viewer to study the image longer. And as a photographer, I think that's the goal, especially when, people are, and I mentioned this, I think I mentioned this in episode 1. People are just inundated and flooded with images. And so if you can get somebody to look at your photo longer, I think it's effective. Those are my photos for January. Now, February. Now this is a reflection of, I think, one of my best photos of the year, and then also a personal favorite of mine. And the thing is, I feel like in this photo, this will be like a single standalone photo that you wouldn't need to have multiple photos to tell the story. Now, this also is another favorite of mine. I feel like February, I had a couple of great moments to capture. One thing I love about this image is the hand all the way in the far back. Now, the thing is that I don't exactly remember what the context of this image is. I don't know if this was like during like a call for salvation. I'm pretty sure it is, because if you look in the foreground, and if it was, I think that's really, a beautiful image. I think I used the 70 to 200. Okay, so this photo, I did not expose this photo well at all. And I think it's because I was kind of like rushing just to get the shot. Kind of like the photo in a way. I do like the lighting. I mean, composition wise, it's okay. It could be better, but it's really, what really makes this photo is not what I did as a photographer, but what the action being demonstrated. So sometimes I feel like when it comes to, what we do, it's not always us, but it's just honestly what the subject is doing. Now for March, okay, so I had this was hard for me to pick from March. March was a good month. 4 images that I pulled for this month to show you as my personal favorites were all taken during the same service. Easter, or we say Resurrection Sunday. The lighting, okay, was phenomenal. First photo, okay, so high angle, high position shots. I love to utilize that, especially in church. And this is one of my favorite, I think it's one of my best photos. The lighting, I mean, that was the Lord's doing. Because let me tell you something. The only light really in this image is the sunlight. That's it. Listen, I feel like this is a standalone image. You don't really need anything else. In this crowd of people, you have one man with his hand raised. So next image, very similar, same conditions. Those 2 shots that I took at a high angle are a reflection of attention to detail and my emphasis on composition. So I just centered her between those like 2 poles that are like kind of sticking out. It's a really good photo. If you watch the first episode of Witness to Glory, A Photographer's Testimony, then you've seen this image before. I will tell you one thing, it is hard photographing praise dancers. It is hard. The movement, the action is swift and it's fast. There's a lot of changes, a lot of transitionings happening in like the pieces and stuff like that. But the thing is, I like this photo. I like the colors. The only thing that I really did to make this photo was that I shot this at a low angle, at a low position, in order to get the 4 windows. That's where a lot of the light was coming through. It was just a really good lighting day, natural light day, because I don't shoot with a flash. All right, so the next image that I have of March, this is one of my favorite images of baptism. Okay, so here's the thing. This is what I meant when it comes to faceless portraits and how it forces you to study the image more to understand what is happening. This was not necessarily an intentional shot. It's just that I kept shooting. So like obviously when you're photographing a baptism, you photograph the person, you know, coming down into the water, and then you photograph them coming up and then being toweled by the elder that is standing nearby to like embrace them out of the water. For this image, it was like when I was going through like the culling process and I was like, whoa, this is dope. So this is one of my favorite photos I've ever taken of baptism. I'm telling you, that Easter Sunday, I mean, all right, so March and April, I think I got back-to-back favorites. Now, this image, again, is a reflection of that same, you know, principle about faceless portraits. But the thing is, also when it comes to photographing like young people and kids, this is a technique that I often use intentionally. Love this image. I think it's just absolutely adorable. So the next one of my favorite shots, I don't think it's one of my best shots, but I think it's one of my favorites because this was an image that I've never actually attempted to capture. Now, if you come from charismatic or Pentecostal background, I grew up seeing people run around in church. But the thing is, as an adult, I don't see that happen as often. The fact that that moment happened and I was able to capture it. One thing I'm trying to get better at is experimenting with shooting at a slower shutter to capture that movement and action. Now, this one is one of my favorites. Reason being, because this was a matter of me, like I said before, being patient. It was like an altar call for the men. And while everybody's like walking back to their seats, you still have the one man that is at the altar there. In regards to storytelling, if you were not there for that moment and you're looking at it after the fact and you don't have the full context, I feel like this isn't a perfect example of an image where you can make up a scenario and that image will fit that scenario story. March, April, May, yo, listen. All right, so these photos were probably taken all during the same service. You see this person kneeling at the altar. I think it's just a reflection of like the way that we should live our lives as Christians. It should always be at the feet of Jesus. The presence of the other person's hand in the picture. While you're at the feet of Jesus, somebody else is there with you. I just like the fact that I think this image can convey that, and I think this could be like a single story image. The next image is very similar in that this was taken all at the same time. Some of these photos look obtrusive, but in reality, they're actually not, because I'm not actually as close as the image may let on, especially because I like to shoot with telephoto lenses. I like to keep it within the range of 70 to 200. I was not using a 70 to 200, I don't think, for this photo. I could have been using it, I think maybe an 85. The other photo that I took is one of my favorites too. I like it because of the lighting. I think it's great in black and white. In the church spaces where you do find, you know, a sense of community among men of faith. And I think we need more of this, and not just in photos, but actually because it happened. This one is one of my personal favorites. I love this. Now, I shot this at a low position. They're on the floor. I said, I have to get on the floor because I need to make sure that I'm getting this right. When I look at this image, it makes me feel good. The thought and idea that, like, especially you can say like, hey sis, I'm going to come and sit down here with you. Like, anyway. June, did we experience a lull in June? We kind of did. All right, so we had a good 3 months going, and then it's like, okay. Now this photo, I like it because of the composition. There's a broader context to this image, and it goes with the other series of images. This is not a single story photo. But the reason why I like it is because what I had to do to get the shot. So I think I used a 24-70 to get the shot. If you'll notice that there are two people in the foreground, for me, I had to position myself to be in the middle, right behind them, and kind of crouch down to get this shot. So I like it because of the lighting, the color grading, and then also what I had to do to compose this shot. So yeah. Other photo that I took is also from the same event, the same evening. I like it because I took a different approach where I would have positioned myself pretty much in the seat of the audience to get the shot. Instead, I was like, let me go all the way to the back and get behind and then photograph the shot. July. This is another image that I like. Like I said before, when it comes to photographing, you know, young people and kids, I like to show what they're doing. What's photographed in the image is kids making a rainbow. The rainbow is significant for Christians because it is symbolic. It is the proof, the evidence of God's promise not to flood the earth. And this is something that is taught to little children because the imagery of the ark, the animals, the rainbow is something that they can visually connect with. You know, even to the Israelites of the Old Testament is to recount and to remember the things that Yahweh did. And so the fact that we're still continuing on in this tradition of training up our children is a good thing. All right, so August didn't have a lot going on in August because I had went away. Now this image, the reason why I like this image, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's not really because of anything significant. I was really intentional about making sure to get that light. So I use a 24-70 and I was probably shooting at maybe 24. All right, we're gonna move on anyway to September. Oh, this one right here. I like this photo, and I actually messed up taking it because my camera was not focusing right at all. But this is another photo taken at the altar. Now this is a high angle. This could be a standalone photo, I think. And I like the fact that two people holding up the woman in the middle. Like, I feel like there could be a whole message concerning the Christian faith. This is one of my favorite photos. I love the composition of this image. And this is a matter of like being prepared, because this is taking place at the altar and people are leaving the altar. You have a whole bunch of people in the foreground and they're actually like layered, like one after the other. If they could be like leading lines, leading your eye to the center of the image, it was actually like an elder hugging this woman who was at the altar. I'm like, timing, like, the timing of the shot, had any other elements in this image had been different or changed, I would have missed this moment. October, yes. What was really great about this Sunday was the color grading for me. That's what I got excited about. I was like, yeah, I captured really, like, I think beautiful moments, but I was like, the color grading? Woo. I think this is probably one of the better or best examples that I've shown so far of, I think, a good photo. Like, there's nothing about this image, honestly, that I would change. And to me, that's what defines a good photo, is that there's nothing about the image I would change. Now, this photo, I was really intentional about composing. Just the fact that everybody's stretching their hands, and I was really intentional about focusing on the young man. Then also this example of like another like faceless portrait, at least for the subject, for that matter. But I think it still accomplishes the job. All right, November. All right, okay, I was not hitting in November, I'll tell you that. But this first photo, I made it black and white. These are, again, brothers at the altar. Why are they walking away from the altar? There's a lot going on in this particular photo that I didn't even recognize that. Oh, okay, so like you have like, you know, there's two sets. The more visible and obvious set, he has his hand on his shoulder, and then the other one, the one in front of them, he also has his hand on his shoulder. That's pretty cool too. So I said it's a layered shot. You know, you got to study a little bit longer to see what's going on. I just encourage myself to like the image. We finally in December. Okay, woo! This picture goes with a set of images that are revolving teens and their engagement in church. So the fact that you have a physical Bible among teens, I think that is important. It can be a single story photo, but because it's what's actually being photographed, the subject itself, and also us testing out sepia goes along with these other sepia images that I took. This next image, I like it because of the layering. I made this image in black and white. I was also considering doing like a sepia version of this. I opted to go with black and white because I felt it looked better. Now this image is one of the most recent images that I took, a selection of congregates in praise and worship, and I feel like this works as a great standalone photo. This is like a good image to kind of close out 2024 with. I've taken these photos using a variety of gear. So for bodies, I used an RP, I used an R8, and I used an R6 Mark II. For lenses, my main lens was a 70-200. Second, the 85, the 24-70, and the 50. On very rare occasions. There were some challenges that I did have this year with my gear. My RP broke. Well, not the whole body itself. Rather, it was the screen that broke. It fell off a tripod and then also have to deal with the dying motor of a 70-200. Those were just challenges that I had in terms of gear. But creative challenges that I had, monotony. Monotony is defined by Merriam-Webster as tedious sameness. Tedious sameness. Caught in like a routine, you get bored creatively. I try to look at things differently. In practice, what that can look like is that I will give myself an assignment. Sometimes I'm given assignments of things to photograph, but then ultimately assign myself certain things to do. So like, I'm going to make it a mission to photograph this particular ministry for the service. Something that I really started thinking about, especially when it comes to like photographing praise and worship team rehearsals. How many images are you going to get of the praise and worship team with the mic in their hand. But what if you get an image of them when they're not singing, when they're just interacting with one another? Instead of looking for the moments of them being on platform, look for moments of them when they're not, when they're just engaging and interacting with one another. The goal is to try to humanize the people that you photograph. I take pictures of the drummer and I'm like, I have never captured a photo of the drummer standing up. It's just the most simplistic things, but they make a world of a difference creatively because it gives you something else to photograph. When I was dealing with monotony, I never stopped looking to find a way to photograph things differently. And I think that is important. So I would attribute that to a success. Trying to see things from different perspectives, that your eye never stops searching for moments to capture. And I think showing up and delivering every time is important, regardless if you do church photography or not. But ultimately, I think why that matters, especially in the context of church photography, is trust. I think over time, in the way that I have shown up and delivered has earned people's trust. That is so important when it comes to the photographer-client relationship, is that they can trust you. And that's why I said in the first episode, I want to be detached from the work so I don't get big-headed about what I do. And really, it's not what I do, it's what I'm a witness to. And that's the whole point of the series, is that we're not creating or making these moments, we are witnessing them. I think the key to being an effective witness, having a consciousness of God. I think a love for people and a heart of humility. We have to have a heart of humility. If it was just you stand alone, things wouldn't go so great. So our trust and reliance on the Lord, that comes with us having a consciousness of Him. And then if we are consciousness of the Lord, then we would have a desire to love people well. And then all of these come together and make us excellent witnesses to glory.